Welcome back to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. Earlier today, inside New York City's Grand Central Station, demonstrators staged a so-called die-in to protest the grand jury's decision not to indict the NYPD officer who placed Eric Garner in a headlock while attempting to arrest him. Now, at this hour, protests are going on throughout the city. We'll continue to monitor what is a very tense situation at this hour in New York City. Joining me now, though, first is forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden. He was hired by the Garner family to review the medical examiner's final autopsy. Also, Fox News senior correspondent Geraldo Rivera and former NYPD detective Bo Dietl. Before I say anything, my level of anger here over this stupidity. We have limited police resources. We have crack dealers. We have heroin dealers. We have rapists. And cops I don't blame them. They're told they've got to go out and arrest people. There are complaints made over a freaking cigarette, Geraldo. That is beyond stupid to me.
This was a chump charge. Yeah. This man never should have died as a result of this encounter. I also believe, I've waded through 2 demonstrations to get here just now. I hugged the cops as I came. I love you guys. I love you for everything you do.
You walk around like a rock star, you and Bo.
But if this grand jury had not been in the predominantly white borough of Staten Island, the county of Staten Island, and had been in the Bronx,
disagree.
This officer would have been indicted.
I want to see the evidence, Bo Dietl, because...
Listen to me. I've done this thing many times. I'm 5'8", and I had to take down guys 6'2", 6'3". I've taken them down like that scores of times. You grab him, you get him down to the ground. You don't want to start flailing his hands around. Problem here is he was still talking when he was down. If it was a chokehold, he would have been unconscious on the ground. Let's face it. Our hearts go out to that family. There's a dead guy here. Shouldn't have been. But in reality, if he went and put his hand in the back of him, he was being arrested, and the cops were there for a reason. The cops were there for a reason. There was calls by the community.
Dead. But they never, come on, you don't die for selling cigarettes.
Well, I agree with you.
You don't die for selling cigarettes.
Hang on. The way you do it, you got to lock in. And you've got to go for the carotid artery in about 16 seconds.
Way too macho, man. Way too macho.
But it's not just technical. Because I will bet you that when we get to see the evidence, what the grand jury heard, I bet you they heard a lot about chokehold versus headlocks. Dr. Baden, you got to examine.
Well, first of all, I agree with you that it's silly to go after somebody for selling single cigarettes in the community to people who can't afford to buy a whole pack of cigarettes.
$6 in taxes for 1 pack in New York City.
But I think the autopsy itself, the medical examiner did a great job in this. 27 pages in the report. And the female, she found that there were 10 hemorrhages in the inside of the neck, in the muscles of the neck, petechial hemorrhages in the eye, hemorrhage in the tongue, and those are all evidence of neck compression. I think you're right. Chokehold has many different meanings and all. What we're concerned at autopsy was there pressure on the neck. There was pressure on the neck and pressure on the chest.
I don't doubt it. This is a big guy. Right.
Pressure on the chest that interferes with the lungs expanding.
But they also
and there was hands on the face and nose. So he couldn't breathe, and he was telling the truth. But he was still
talking. Does that impact his ability to talk if he can't breathe?
Yeah, no, you can say I can't breathe. Absolutely.
But they also mentioned the fact that he was asthmatic, had heart disease, and obesity.
Right.
All right. So, and it's a high-stress situation here.
Right.
Here's where I want to ask you this question. I grant you any arrest that's caught on videotape, which, again, for a cigarette is insanity to me, is going to look violent. But when we get to the legality here, if there is a technical difference, and a very specific one, about going for the carotid artery, going for the trach, and that being a chokehold illegal versus a headlock legal, that's why I will argue that when we get the evidence in, that is where the grand jury made their distinction.
We used to have nightsticks. Remember the old nightsticks? And we used to come up behind a guy and put it on his neck. That's a choke.
That's a choke.
That's what I don't understand. And there's a couple of minutes you get him down. My whole thing here is that cop never, and that grand jury heard it, he never left that day with any intentions of this man dying.
But no one is saying
it's a terrible accident.
That's a fake. That's
so
a
when
big
you get
argument.
these people outside there saying the cops are all
negligent
wrong,
homicide.
no, I don't see that. I see
criminally negligent homicide.
The intention was to bring
if you and I are messing around and you end up dead, I can be indicted for criminally negligent.
The intention's not there.
Did he probably Was he probably negligent? Was this cop probably negligent in the way he applied force to this big man?
I brought guys down like that many a times around, and they don't die.
Let the jury decide then. Let the jury decide.
So if I brought a guy down here by a headlock like that, and I brought a guy down, he dies.
Sean, it is impossible not to see this outside the context of race.
That's right.
A white grand jury puts themselves in those cops' shoes. A black grand jury will put themselves in the victim's shoes. That's the harsh reality of American justice today.
Did he resist arrest?
Yes.
And if somebody resists arrest, what are police supposed to do?
Yes, and he was totally unsavory character, a pain in the neck, a public nuisance. That's why I want my taser. Get the taser, he gets shocked. You put the cuffs on him, 15 seconds later, he's awake. Nobody's dead.
And there's no comparison with St. Louis.
The cop's career is there's no comparison.
No comparison.
This is a lot.
While we're talking here, I want to take a live shot we got out of Oakland, California that is coming in right now. As you can see, protests now have expanded beyond New York City, and that is a live shot. We'll go down to the ground there in a few minutes. Dr. Baden, I saw you wanted to weigh in on this discussion. It may sound technical and it may sound like it's semantics, but if one hold is illegal and the other is legal, that is a big distinction.
That's a distinction, but in this case doesn't make a difference to me, because what we're looking at, the autopsy findings. The autopsy findings, whatever we call chokehold, headlock, there was enough pressure on the neck to prevent the blood flow that you talked about, to prevent airflow, and pressure on the chest and face, so that when he's saying, I can't breathe, he's telling the truth.
He said it 11 times.
And he died of not being able to breathe.
But from the standpoint, I understand as an autopsy you're going to do this.
Right.
But if a grand jury is looking at this legally, and a police officer is trained, and he's told this choke is legal, this one isn't, this one's illegal, this one's legal.
The New York State penal law, you can use a chokehold. It is not illegal. The department policy doesn't want you to use it.
I agree with Bo on that. But when the guy says he can't breathe and you're on top of him and your hands around his neck,
let him up.
You at least get your hand away from his neck.
And that's not negligence. He was giving me a chokehold before.
At the very least, that's not negligence.
You knew I couldn't breathe, so you tell him I can't breathe.
The cop didn't go to kill him.
Not at all.
The cop
That's
was
the whole
negligent.
thing when the cop went into the grand jury.
What about
He said,
this?
my intentions were to bring him down, not hurt other officers. That's what it was. This is a terrible accident that occurred with this man. It is not an intentional murder. When you got these people
I'm not
out
saying
there
it's
with
a
their
murder.
hands
We're
up
talking
and
about
all
criminally negligent
No, I don't.
homicide.
That's too far. You're going too far.
That's as low as a homicide gets.
Well, I don't believe this should be.
Michael
A homicide is by another. Am I right, Doc?
I love Bo Dietl, but Geraldo's right.
You're saying in terms of his argument.
Yeah, but I think also
where was the EMT? It took 4 minutes for them to get there.
Oh, that's another issue. Yeah. Why didn't the EMT?
You said on Greta tonight that they might have still thought he was breathing when he wasn't.
So why did he get marched?
Well, I want to hear this.
No. After he loses consciousness, he still breathes for a few minutes before his heart stops.
But they might not have known he was unconscious.
Well, he stopped struggling. He stopped saying, "I can't breathe." The problem is that when there's more than one cop on a person, they may pull each other and they may not know that the person is.
All right.
But what I was going to say,
we've got to take a break.